All right, people. Good evening. I know this video is a little bit late. Wasn't able to get to my computer until now. Wasn't able to record any kind of video immediately following the Super Bowl. But I gotta ask, now that it's over, I gotta ask, what are we gonna learn from that one? What are we gonna learn from Super Bowl 59? Because whatever it is that we're supposed to learn from that game, we are supposed to learn it emphatically because that was a very emphatic game. The score is bad, but if you watch the game, you know it was a lot worse than that score. At one point, it was what 31-0, and then Kansas City scored 3 touchdowns in garbage time. So yeah, we understand that whatever lessons you take away from that game, they are pretty definitive. This isn't a game that could have gone either way and hinged on one or two plays. No, this was a start to finish beatdown. And I'm sure that if there was some reason why the Eagles needed to maybe say win by 50 points, they probably could have. Like, I don't think Kansas City puts a point on the board if Philadelphia remains fully engaged that whole 60 minutes. So, whatever it is we're going to learn from that game, it's a pretty powerful statement, right? This isn't like 2 years ago where the game came down to the last 10 seconds and could have gone either way. So, what's going on, everybody? Hope you had fun with the Super Bowl. Maybe you hate the Chiefs and you love seeing them get blown out. Maybe you really like this Eagles team and you love seeing them put up a 40 burger in the Super Bowl. Whatever your reason may be for getting something great out of that Super Bowl, I hope you got something great out of it because I know most of us didn't. I know for most of us, that was a boring game that was over really, really early on. Halftime felt like it was over when it was 31 or 34-0 or whatever it was at one point. It was definitely over. And at that point, the only thing that mattered was who's going to be Super Bowl MVP. What's the final score going to be? Am I going to hit my props? Am I going to hit my money line bet? Am I going to, well, not money line, but a over under bet, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, interesting game for sure. Not a very good game if we're being honest, but I'm not. I said in my pregame video, I'm fine with either of these teams winning. I didn't have any overly negative feelings about either squad. I respect both teams. There are some things about each team that get on my nerves, but they're not enough to make me despise them or resent them in any overpowering way. So I'm good with it, man. Props to the Eagles. Props to the Chiefs for being there. Maybe not so much for what happened in that game, but again, I got to ask. Main thing, what can we learn here? Well, the final score might have you believe otherwise, but I'll say it again. This game was over before Kansas City scored a single point. It was 31-0, 34-0 at one point. And after watching the way this game went down, one thing that I can say, and this is not so much a lesson as it is an affirmation, but defense is well and truly back in the NFL. I remember 2 years ago when the Chiefs played the Eagles in the Super Bowl 57, and I came away from that game feeling like defense in the NFL was just dead, and the only thing that mattered was building an elite offense because I watched both of those teams look unstoppable offensively that whole game. And I watched as the Eagles, who had assembled one of the greatest pass rushes in NFL history and had one of the best defenses in the league and had been so good that entire season, get completely dog walked by Kansas City's offense. I watched their pass rush basically fail to put so much as a finger on Mahomes. I watched them give up 38, I guess 31 points because of the defensive touchdown, but 31 points. And then on the other side, not that the Chiefs had an elite defense that year, but they had, a viable defense. I watched Jalen Hurts rip them to shreds. And I was like, defense just doesn't matter anymore. If you have good offensive players and a good offensive coach, you're just going to bulldoze your way through anything. Well, 2 years later, I had the exact opposite reaction to this game. We saw the Philadelphia Eagles defense, which was one of the best in the league, go up against a Kansas City team with, look, it's not an elite offense. We know that. They haven't been elite all year. But You've got the best quarterback, and you've got one of the best coaches, if not the best coach. Andy Reid is probably the best active NFL coach right now. Maybe you could argue one or two guys are better than him at this moment, but they don't have Andy Reid's resume, not even close. So you got that. And 2 years ago, that probably would have resulted in a monstrous Kansas City offensive explosion, regardless of the defense. But they could do nothing out there. And part of the reason why is because they haven't built the offense in the best possible way around Mahomes at this particular moment. But still, it's not like things were perfect a couple of years ago. A couple of years ago, the Chiefs, they had a significant role on their team for Kadarius Toney. So it's not like everything was, they didn't have some uber stacked team 2 years ago. They still had their way with Philadelphia. And that made me think one thing. This game made me come away with the opposite thing. And in the immediate aftermath of the Seahawks hiring a defensive-minded head coach like Mike Macdonald, it is an affirmation that there's nothing wrong with that, and it can work, and it can be a good thing. So the defense in the NFL is back. And while the Eagles offense played very well in this game, I'm not saying anything otherwise. They did their thing. They had 350 yards and excuse me. And they could have certainly done more if they didn't hit garbage time so early. But defense is kind of back to being able to win championships, it feels like. 2 years ago, I felt like that was over. Now we're back. So, Mike Macdonald, you get our defense on the level of the Eagles, and hopefully we can have a result like that in the next couple of years here. Beyond that, I would say you look at that game, and there are a couple different approaches to take with your offensive line mentality, right? The Kansas City Chiefs offensive line looked awful. They got destroyed. And really, that comes back to one thing that Kansas City had to deal with in this game. They had to bump Joe Thuney out to left tackle, and he looked awful at left tackle. He's a guard. But they bumped him out there because they had to for this game, and he couldn't keep up. He got destroyed. Not that that was the only problem. Creed Humphrey didn't look good either. Jawan Taylor didn't look good. None of them looked good, really. That whole offensive line was getting beaten down. So you look at that Kansas City offensive line that they have spent heavily on. Creed Humphrey's making a lot of money. They got Trey Smith in there. They've thrown a bunch of money at, Joe Thuney's making big money. I know he's out of position in this game, but that's a guy who is making a lot of money. So the Chiefs have invested heavily in their offensive line, and still they can have a result like that. And there are two different ways to take that. The first way is, oh, look, you can invest heavily into an offensive line and still have it be bad, which might be the John Schneider way of looking at things, which is probably the scenario we should be a little bit afraid of right now. Or you can look at it as, look at how hard you have to work to make your offensive line good. You can work as hard as the Kansas City Chiefs have over the last few years to make their offensive line good. You can still have a game like that. So you better be willing to put in the work, because to even have a chance, you have to go above and beyond. Kansas City has spent massively up front, and yet they still had a game like they had today. But then, on the other side of it, you look at the Eagles, and you look at how good their offensive line was today for the most part. I know they didn't open up the holes for Saquon. I know they didn't run the ball a lot, but Jalen Hurts, for the most part, had time back there. The couple of times he did get pressure, it usually came from some all-out Kansas City blitz. So I hope that John Schneider looks at this game and comes away with the right lesson. He compares what was going on Kansas City's offensive line to Philadelphia's offensive line, looks at the results of this game and goes, hey, that's pretty important. But already in the back of my head, I can see John Schneider going the other way, which is to say, why even try? Kansas City has bent over backwards to build their offensive line, and look what happened to them in the big game. So time will tell which way they decide to take this advice, this incidental, I guess you could call it, advice from a Super Bowl. But there are a couple different ways to read into that, and I just hope John Schneider picks the right one, because I would love to have what Philadelphia has right now, where they just have this offensive line that can make anything look good almost around them. That's not the only thing they have. A.J. Brown's a great receiver. Devontae Smith's a really good receiver. Saquon, I know he didn't do anything today, but he's one of the best running backs in football. So I'm not saying the rest of that team is bad, but I'm saying that team looks much better than they do, and they would otherwise. I mean, Saquon spent years on the Giants and never won anything. Didn't look nearly this good either. So something to keep in mind. I think another lesson would be to not be afraid of going for it, and knowing that even if you go for it and fail, you can go for it again and again and again until eventually something works. This Eagles team has been very aggressive in the last several years with Howie Roseman. They go for it over and over and over again. And here's the thing. They go for it in ways that I personally sometimes don't agree with. I didn't like the Saquon signing very much. I wouldn't have done it. That kind of goes against what I would do in the NFL if I were in charge, because I just think giving a bunch of money to a running back who's already had big injury problems in his career is a bad thing to do. I wouldn't have done the things that Philly did over the last couple of years, but at least they did it. At least they tried. At least they took swings. They didn't just stand in the batter's box and wait for a strikeout. They didn't just try to bunt the runner over. They took big swings, tried to hit home runs, and when you try to hit a home run as a front office, yeah, you will have a failure rate, but sometimes you hit the home run. And I can respect Philadelphia taking measured, reasonable swings at trying to be this team, at trying to be a team that could win the Super Bowl in that form by going for it. So that's another lesson to me. Don't be afraid to bring in big free agents. You got to find the right guys. Not everything you do is going to work. And they might even do stuff that I don't agree with. But take the swings. It's okay. And if you mess it up, it's really not that hard to wipe the slate clean and take more chances later. That's what Howie Roseman does. He's done some wild stuff to keep that team together. Lane Johnson has so much void year money coming up on his contract that Philadelphia is going to be feeling it down the line, but I think they'll get over it. They just won a Super Bowl. And I think the number one thing that I come away from with this Super Bowl in terms of a lesson is I don't need to be hearing nothing about the quarterback position for a while, all right? Jalen Hurts, whose arm is like a blunderbuss, just won the Super Bowl, just won Super Bowl MVP in a blowout. Jalen Hurts can barely complete a pass over 12 yards most of the time. He can throw the 9 routes, right? He can throw the 9 routes. But other than that, the difference between Jalen Hurts as a passer and Jimmy Garoppolo is minimal in terms of overall quality. Jalen Hurts on any other team would barely look like a starter. That guy is not good. He does add some value in certain areas, I get that, but if you take all of the Jalen Hurts traits and put them together and you try to rank it, I don't even know if he's a top half of the league starter. I really don't. And I don't think that he is. I think that Jalen Hurts on other teams would look like maybe a lesser version or approximately equivalent version of Bo Nix. But he just won the Super Bowl. He just won Super Bowl MVP. He just won in dominating fashion. So I need to tamp down. I seriously need this fan base to tamp down on this obsession with trying to find Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. Like that's easy to do. If it was easy to do, then everybody would do it. And if this Super Bowl teaches you anything, it's that you don't need it. You don't need that top 5 quarterback. You don't even need a top 10 quarterback. I don't think Jalen Hurts is top 15, personally. So if Jalen Hurts can do it, I don't want to hear nothing about how Geno Smith can never win a Super Bowl. Get out of here with that. Jalen Hurts can barely hit an accurate target over 12 yards, and he's sitting with a Super Bowl MVP award right now. You know why? Because that Eagles team has built a team that can win and have success with anyone at quarterback. And it's not easy to do, but they've done it. And they've done it with that contract. That's another thing that maybe I'd take away from this Super Bowl. Yeah, it's harder to win a Super Bowl when you're paying a quarterback big money, but it's not impossible. Jalen Hurts has a $250 million contract. I know the bigger cap hits haven't kicked in yet, but Jalen Hurts is making massive dollars right now. Jalen Hurts' contract is crippling down the line. And the Eagles aren't afraid to build with it. The Eagles aren't afraid to rock with it. So don't tell me it can't be done. Jalen Hurts, probably not even a top half starting quarterback in the league, is making $250 million over 5 years on that contract. I think it's kicked in by now. I know he hasn't gotten to the big cap hits yet, but those cap hits are coming, and they're terrifying. But the Eagles are not scared to still go for it in the offseason, build the best team possible, and find ways to win even with it. So if the next couple weeks rolls around and we give Geno Smith a bunch of money, I know there are going to be people who come out and say, oh, you can't win paying a quarterback that kind of money unless it's Patrick Mahomes because everyone else was on a rookie deal, da-da-da-da-da. No. I'm not saying it's easy, but if it was easy, we wouldn't be paying people millions of dollars to make it happen. You build an offensive line that can make the quarterback look better than he is. You build a running game that can make the quarterback look better than he is. You build an offense that can amplify the quarterback's strengths and make life easier for him. You build a defense that supports the quarterback at such an elite level that you don't need him putting up 50 points every week to win. That's the main takeaway that I hope people have from this Super Bowl. The objective is not to get a quarterback who can win in any situation. Your job is to build a situation that allows any quarterback to win. That's the contrast here, guys. The Chiefs had a quarterback who was supposed to be able to win in any situation, and the Eagles had a situation that was supposed to win with any quarterback, and look what happened. All right, I'm going to go and get out of here. I got some things to do tonight. Videos coming out in the morning. We're back to the off-season stuff, but that is the number one lesson I need people to take away from this game. All right? The Eagles built up a perfect situation. The Kansas City Chiefs built up a perfect quarterback. And guess what won? The perfect situation won with Jalen Hurts. And I know some people out there are going to defend Jalen Hurts, but I'm sorry, I don't see it. I think he's about average. But look how good he can look in this situation. See you guys later. Go Hawks.